Today's video is sponsored by our very own Spring Store, but more about that later.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Deep Dive. There is a question that divides many in the scuba diving industry, and the rest don't really care, I don't think. DIN or A-clamp? A question as old as time. Which is better? Which should you buy? Why are there two different types of DIN fittings? Well, when you're investing in a new set of regulators, you usually have the choice of either A-clamp or DIN. Sometimes A-clamp goes by other names like Yoke or International, they call it different things. I'm just going to call it A-clamp. DIN is usually called DIN, or in some cases it's called DIN 300, and in a few rare instances you can also find the rare DIN 232. There are pros and cons to both fittings and a certain amount of heritage, which is why they both still exist, because, oh, my instructor used this one, I'm going to use that one. But if one was so substantially better or one woefully poor, then we would all just settled on a favourite by now. Personally, I dive on DIN. I have dived on A-clamp and I taught students on A-clamp regulators. There's nothing particularly bad about A-clamp regulators. I just considered DIN a safer fitting. I felt like I needed to get that out so that you can, talk about my biases down in the comments below, but I'll try to be objective in what are the differences between A-clamp and DIN. A-clamp works by clamping over the entire tank valve on your cylinder, and then you tighten a screw section at the back that clamps the regulator onto the back of the tank valve, so it's wrapped all the way around it. When you open the tank valve, the pressure pushes on the regulator in a sense that effectively locks it in position and creates a seal. A-clamp regulators are pretty quick to fit onto tanks, so setting up is pretty fast, and breaking the kit down after a dive is pretty fast too, as long as you've depressurized your regulators. Most places around the world will cater to A-clamp regulators because it was the original fitting. Older tank valves will be A-clamp, newer tank valves will accept both A-clamp and DIN. A-clamp regulators require a tank valve that has an O-ring fitted to it to create a sealing surface, and the first consideration is that not all O-rings are the same size, and the sealing surface on A-clamp regulators can vary in size also, so it can be a pain to get a good seal with certain combinations of the two. And because the O-ring is on the tank itself, if you're renting tanks, that O-ring may not be the best quality, so it is a good idea to bring some of your own as backup. But remember that they do come in different sizes, so you may need to bring a range. The main downsides of A-clamp is extrusion and the added weight. Because A-clamp regulators have a metal yoke that hooks over the tank valve and then a screw handle mechanism, they are physically larger and heavier than DIN first stages. There's simply more metal there. It's not a huge issue as far as the weight goes, but it's not going to throw your trim off or anything, but packing them away can be a little bit harder. Extrusion is way more of a worry for me. With A-clamps, the sealing O-ring sits in kind of a groove inside of the tank valve, and then the A-clamp just kind of sits over the top of it and squishes it down into that groove. On rare occasions and combinations of O-rings and fittings on A-clamp regulators, that O-ring can have enough space to be pushed out of that groove when you're diving, because the tank pressure is literally pushing on it. If the A-clamp isn't sat perfectly or even isn't the right size to hold the O-ring in place, it will just push it out or extrude. Now, I've seen this happen during the dive. Normally it happens right at the beginning when you pressurize it and it just goes psh, doesn't it? I've actually seen someone who was about sort of 5-6 meters under the water, just out of the blue. It's not common, but it can happen.
Calling all scuba divers want to stand out of the non-diving crowd? Do you want people to know that you're a scuba diver? Well, then our very own Spring Store will help you out. We stock tees, stickers, hoodies, phone cases, even mugs that all have a scuba diving theme. From our super popular emotional Bolt Snap tee, our Cave Shark sticker, to our Scuba Dude hoodie, we have something for everyone. And our range is becoming more eco-friendly each month thanks to Spring's eco-friendly range. Each order is printed fresh, which means less waste, less plastic, and it's better for the environment, and also helps battle clothing waste as well. To view our full range, just click on the link pinned in the comments. And hey, why not treat yourself to 10% off your total order with the discount code DSN10. That's DSN10. Okay, back to the video.
DIN regulators are the screw thread regulator, where there's a screw on your regulator that screws into the tank valve. I'm going to say screw a few times, unfortunately, a lot in this video. The sealing O-ring in this case is fitted to your regulator, so it's your responsibility to check and replace that. And the O-ring sits on the end of the screw and then seals on the very inside of the tank valve. DIN regulators can be a bit more fiddly to attach to a tank valve because you have to line the screw thread up perfectly square, and taking them off can be a little bit tricky at times when your hands are wet or cold if that DIN wheel to actually undo it isn't the best design. DIN regulators can hold much higher tank pressures because the O-ring is literally trapped on the very inside of the tank valve, so it can't extrude like an A-clamp. There simply isn't room for it to move. So whilst A-clamp regulators will have a maximum pressure of 232 bar, DIN regulators can often be rated up to 300 bar. There are multiple DIN fittings though, which can complicate things. By far the most common, like 98%, is going to be standard DIN 300, which most regulators will be fitted with, and it will fit to both 300 and 232 bar cylinders without any issue. You can find, on rare occasion, DIN 232 regulators, which simply has fewer screw threads on it, so it can only attach to 232 bar tanks. But these are quite rare. And then you can find M26, which is a whole different kettle of fish, and it's all about nitrox and oxygen-rich gas mixes, but we'll talk about M26 on a different day. DIN is, of course, lighter and smaller than A-clamp, but it is important that you do look after those screw threads and that O-ring as well. Make sure they're nice and clean and they're not damaged in any way. The main downside to DIN is availability, probably. It's relatively new. It's been around for a long time, but compared to A-clamp, it's relatively new. So when you travel to certain areas around the world, they may only have A-clamp valves, and you may need to get an A-clamp adapter to fit your DIN regulator to it. It's not as much of an issue as it used to be. Most places are fairly up to date and have tanks for you, but it is definitely worth asking before you travel. To sum up really quickly and kind of badly, A-clamp is heavy but quick. It has the risk of extrusion, but you can use it pretty much anywhere. DIN takes a bit longer to set up, but it's safer. But you can also find it a little bit hard to find a DIN tank in some obscure places. Now, personally, I've never had a problem finding a tank for my DIN regulators around the world, but I do still see a few old A-clamp only tank valves still in circulations in certain places. Luckily for me, they're usually sat next to a modern tank valve that I can fit my DIN regulators to, but what do you prefer? There are actually some select regulators now that are only available in DIN. They don't even make an A-clamp option. Is that controversial from an A-clamper's perspective? Let's discuss down in the comments below and see which is the winner. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.